Hello, and welcome back to If These Old Beasts Could Talk. This is what most people think about when they think of an antique insulator. These old railway telegraph pole style telephone, telegraph, or signal wire insulators like you see in front of you. Did you know there are thousands of varieties of these insulators that are made out of a ton of different materials? Today, I'll go over some of the biggest categories of those insulators and try and show you exactly what some of them are used for. Starting with insulators like this. These are the sort of telegraph, telephone, railroad signal style of signal insulators that I like. Well, they're telephone and telegraph insulators. I like to call them signal insulators. The wire you see in front of you right there is actual signal line wire. I took it from a garbage pile by where there used to be a signal line on the railway near me. This over here is definitely something that would have been used for a telephone or a telegraph because it's Amtel and Tel Company, AT&T. This over here, again, is the Hemingway style. These are still mostly in use. These have mostly been gotten rid of by AT&T. And these are sometimes in use with these over here, but sometimes they're taken down in favor of spools. That's a transposition insulator. It allows one wire to cross over another wire like that, and basically allows for less fuzziness in long-distance phone transmission and the such. The next insulators we'll get into will be customer insulators, but first there needs to be a little bit of pre-knowledge on how electricity works in America in order to really understand how those work. In front of you right now is a transformer tag, which kind of begins to tell you how the whole American power system works. Two high voltage wires come in, and then out comes 120 volts, 240 volts, and a neutral wire. Now, those three wires coming out correspond to these three customer insulators right here. Well, these are half customer insulator, half company insulator. These are what's known as a triplex or a service drop. Each one of these holds a different one of those wires. Nowadays, only one of these is sometimes used, or sometimes none are used at all. But these all came off of my house, which is on a 30s power circuit. So there was three separate lines, three separate insulators. And speaking of my house being old, we also have another thing. We had knob and tube wiring. These two insulators allow the wires to go through walls. For example, this right here allows it to go through drywall, floorboards, and the such, and this right here holds the wires up in the ceiling. Now, both of these insulators would have held either the 120 or 240 circuit, but this explains why you have those plugs that are a different shape in your house for, say, your oven, your dryer, and other things, is because they require a different voltage. Now, in other places besides America, you just have 240, not 120. I think that was done partially as a safety reason, but I also think it was done as a current consumption reduction reason. Anyway, there's another type of insulator here, which is kind of cool. This is an electric fence insulator we found out in the woods. It's technically a customer insulator, but it's still kind of cool in the sense that it's like a livestock fence. This is probably from like the 30s or 40s. I think it's more like the 40s. Anyway, with that understood, I think I'll show off the pole hardware now that has a lot more to do with the actual company distribution than the customer insulators I just showed. And with that, we're back at the transformer. Now, of course, the wires to your house feed back into the transformer, but it's what's after the transformer that matters, involving that 4,800 volts right there, not 48,000. We'll get to that in a moment. But I obviously can't have an example of a transformer because it's 970 pounds and it's full of toxic oil, so that would be kind of ridiculous. Anyway, let's get into some of that hardware I was talking about. The first bit of hardware is a fused cutout. This right here is a cutout. It's from about 2011 and was taken down and given to me by some linemen. Now, there would normally be a fuse crossing that brass thing right there with that big copper bit and that hook area. But unfortunately, I'm not lucky enough to have one of those. These would cut the power going into the transformer so that work could be done. And there are also fuses, of course, so it would blow in the event of a high current failure. But Yeah, these are the more modern equivalent of something I'm about to show right now, which I affectionately like to call a beer bottle, but it's actually a bayonet fuse, and I'll show you exactly what one of these extremely high voltage fuses looks like. This right here is that cutout I was talking about that looked like the beer bottle. Anyway, technically wise, it functions the same way as that box cutout down there, but as I'm about to show you, the fuse actually doesn't hang down or anything. It doesn't, like, pop on there. It actually stays in the same place its entire existence, which is inside that porcelain body right there. Anyway, I'll show you how it works now. With a certain degree of force, you start to understand why it's called the bayonet fuse. You pull that head right there out of the body like a sword from a scabbard. Then once that's out, the head right there and the fuse are connected. You can unscrew that fuse right there, and now you get a glimpse of a 6,000 volt fuse on a 4,800 volt distribution line, not a transmission line. We'll get to that in a moment. That right there is what blows in case there's a high current failure. Now, I will show you something that explodes in an even worse situation when lightning strikes the pole. When lightning strikes a power line, it needs to be grounded out quickly. And that's exactly what this giant piece of Westinghouse hardware right here does. In this top part right here, a wire will go in and be energized and sit that way for mostly its whole existence. In a bottom down there, there's a wire that's connected to the pole and then shoots right in the ground. In the event that lightning strikes the pole, this whole thing, there will be a giant activation of a very heavy spring in there, which will send all of that power directly into the ground. At least I think that's how it operates. I'm not about to cut it open and find out. Anyway, it's these that help protect the line. But what helps insulate it, the actual insulators for the high voltage? Well, that we'll get to right about now. Before I forget, these Jai balls actually serve a good purpose too. These prevent the tension lines on the actual pole itself from contacting in the wind with one of the lives and causing a little bit of a problem. These actually fetch quite a bit of money and are very liked within the insulator collecting hobby. I know personally this is owned by my friend. He has a lot of these Jai strain ones. I have a lot of the main regular types of pin mount insulators. From biggest to smallest, there's a ton of variety of the post mount insulators. From the smallest, earliest generation stuff to the second generation, more weatherproof stuff, to the stacks and to that over there, which is the second generation, but made in 2022, so quite modern. There's also these down here, which are spool insulators meant for neutrals in rural areas, or service drops like those 3 insulators I showed you earlier. Anyway, now on to the big stuff, the stuff that, well, carries the voltage to the substations, which makes this voltage, which gets carried to the transformers. In my speeding around, I almost forgot to mention this. This is a suspension. Suspensions are very, very strong pieces with insulators on them, meant to hold the thick aluminum wires up from those insulators I showed you a minute ago. They also represent some of the highest, craziest voltage transmission lines, but unfortunately I don't have any of the series, well, like the series style connected ones, to make one of those crazy big transmission ones. I do have sub-transmission insulators, though, which I will get to in a minute after I show you this next one. With all the insulators I've shown up till now, they've been, well, really glass. But this one breaks that series. This one right here is actually polymer of sorts, as you can hear. How's it get? There's no way that's glass. It sounds too much like plastic. Well, that's because it is. It's like a polymer rubberized plastic insulator. These, I believe, started production in the 80s and are used quite a few places nowadays. They're about as ubiquitous as the glass ones in certain areas. Anyway, this is it. This is the end game of my collection right here. These are, I like to call them, mushrooms and a stack right there. That stack right there is a Victor from 1996, so some of the newer stuff. And then those two insulators right behind it are presumably from like the 20s through 40s. a Ohio brass mushroom-shaped one right there, and a Thomas mushroom-shaped one. I call them mushrooms. These things still, if you look up at them nowadays, carry solid, I mean a composite of copper wires, because aluminum wires would not really work with these. These represent, of course, again, the highest stuff in my collection. These carry power to the transformers, which carry power to the transformers, which carry power to your house. So they call these sub-transmission. Anyway, this has been If These Old Beasts Could Talk. See you around. This is kind of like a pseudo 100 subscribers special. I hope this enlightened you on some of the uses of these insulators. I know I did not have fun filming it, unfortunately. I lost the original footage, which was like 30 minutes long. Anyway, see you around. I hope to make more videos like this. If you want to subscribe, really anything would help. Anyway, catch you later.